Dr. Jaya Mehta. Over to you, Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you, Ashutosh. This is a. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. So this is a a pleasant task that I have to perform to introduce old friend and comrade Jaya Mehta, as we've come to call her. Um, and Kudumbashree has been sort of kind of a bit of a monument in our sort of history together, and it has felt like a monumental task also of sort, because every time I would go to Indore over a period of, I think it's been 10 years, and I would ask Jaya, what is she working on? And she would say that she's working on Kudumbashree, or she wants to complete Kudumbashree, and she wishes that she would complete Kudumbashree, and it's not getting over. So it's really I never thought that I'd be introducing Jaya in the context of Kudumbashree, but such is life. So yeah, so Jaya is an, as I said, an old friend and an old comrade. She has been a source of sort of nurturance for me over the years. Her warmth, her sense of humanity, and infectious camaraderie and comradeship have had a uplifting effect on me over the years. And she was sort of, I would always get a message from her implicitly saying that we are all in it together, so you don't have to feel alone. And I have known Jaya to sort of as someone who possesses abiding sense of social responsibility, uh, a deep feeling of welfare for fellow humans, especially the underprivileged and the oppressed. And so it follows a deep commitment to a just, equitable, and preferably socialistic world order. Uh, that would be the preference. And in terms of sort of more formal introduction, Jaya is Dr. Jaya Mehta. Dr. Jaya Mehta, a PhD from Bombay University, is a senior economist currently, working full time with the Joshi Adhikari Institute of Social Studies since 2009 as director of research. She was principal coordinator for the study of marginal farmers across 8 states in India. She has been a senior fellow at the Institute of Human Development, New Delhi, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, New Delhi, and Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. Before that, as I think Basil mentioned earlier, that she was a reader at the Gokhale Institute in Pune of politics and economics. She's also a founder member of Alternative Economic Survey Group and has been contributing regularly to its annual numbers. Written several articles on poverty measurements, agrarian relationships, agrarian relations, women's issues, and the working of socialist economies. Um, for more than for the last sort of 10 years or so, she has been working on the causes of agrarian crisis, something which even I've known her to hold very closely to her heart. And Kudumbashree is a work in that context. And while doing so, she has studied in depth the cooperative movement in India as well as abroad. And her upcoming book on Kudumbashree is focused on this collective farming initiative or effort by women farmers in Kerala. Yeah. So with that, I offer the floor to Jaya and to Comrade Jaya. She introduced me to this whole comradeship, and I'm a bit of a socialist myself. Whatever I am, thanks to her. Yeah. So over to Jaya. We look forward to hearing. Yeah.
Thank you very much for giving me this chance. I don't know, because my acquaintance with Kudumbashree is through agriculture. And what I have studied in Kudumbashree is one particular scheme of Kudumbashree where women do group farming, collective farming. And I reached there because, as Ahmed said, we did a study on marginal farmers' production and marketing behavior in 8 states covering 32 districts. And in that study and whatever I read, I thought that the agrarian crisis in which the economy is engulfed for last so many years. Incidentally, you told me that there may be people who will have problem with English, but that is not so, is it? I don't have to speak in Hindi.
Yeah, you don't have to speak in Hindi.
Okay. Whatever we have been hearing about agrarian crisis, and I'll begin from there. I'll begin from how I understand agrarian crisis, because what I'm going to say is not everybody's understanding of agrarian crisis. If generally one talks of agrarian crisis, we talk of more than 3 lakh farmers committing suicide. Then we talk of soil getting degraded. Then we talk of misuse of water, water scarcity. And then, of course, in last, since I think 2018, 2017, 18, and especially in Maharashtra, farmers have come together. First, it was farmers walking from Nasik to Bombay and asking for implementation of Swaminathan Committee report, especially MSP, and that is minimum support price. So it is now very the most dominant demand amongst the farmers is that give us support. The government should be ready to procure our produce at minimum support price, and this minimum support price should be calculated as recommended by Swaminathan, including all costs of labor and opportunity costs of land, etc., etc. And this has been one of the main talk in the 1-year-long farmers' protest, which we have seen and which has happily concluded with farmers' victory. And I salute them all, and I really have a lot of respect for the kind of discipline, the kind of patience, the kind of democratic behavior, the kind of unity that the farmers have exhibited in past 1 year. And they have really promised that peasantry has the potential to change this system. The farmers of India can stop encroachment of corporates and agribusiness into their production and marketing space. And then farmers of India are not alone, because the entire workforce, I mean 93% of the workforce which belongs to the manufacturing or service sector, but informal economy, is all with them. And everybody is bothered as to how the space is being encroached by corporate and agribusiness, and even the identity of India has got squeezed into few elite behavior of production and marketing and income and consumption. So India is not that, and the people of India have, if these farmers have come, they've represented the people of India, and they have asserted the right of people of India over this country's politics, over this country's resources, over this country's economy. I was saying that even in this protest, the main idea was that this was again, they were asking for repeal of 3 farm laws, and the 3 farm laws related to the market structure of agricultural commodities. And basically the farmers were saying that you cannot disturb the market structure, you cannot disturb the support, the intervention that government has in the market structure, and we will not allow corporates to take over this. Is it okay? So this is the general idea about agrarian crisis. The idea is that farmers are not getting price for their produce. The markets are being encroached by corporates, which should not be. And there is a problem of soil degradation, and there's a problem of water, and proper crops should be there, and organic farming is a big thing. The pesticides and fertilizers are doing a lot of harm to Indian agriculture, etc., etc. But the main central point to consider in agrarian crisis is the availability and distribution of the main resource base for agriculture, which is land. And nobody is talking about nobody is talking about land. And I want to, before I talk about Kudumbashree or I talk about cooperatives, I want to place some statistics before you as to what is the availability of land and how it is distributed among the men and women who are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. There is, and I'm talking from National Sample Survey Organization data, which publishes every 10 years statistics on land ownership and livestock ownership and operational holdings, etc. So if you take the operational land available with agricultural households in the year 1992-93, then the total land available to agricultural households for farming was 125 million hectares. 125 million hectares in the year 1992-93. Now, over the years, this land has rapidly declined. That is, the availability of land for agricultural households for their operations has rapidly declined. And from 1992-93 to the year 2018-19, which is the latest data available, the land has reduced to from 125 million hectares to 84 million hectares. So 40 million hectares of land has gone away from agriculture, has gone away from agricultural households into non-agricultural usage. And I think this is a very alarming statistics about which people are not talking. Now, this 84 million hectares of land, which is available for agricultural households, for agricultural operations in the year 2018-19, there are in all 101 million holdings. 84 million hectares of land and 101 million holdings, which means that average holding size is less than 1 hectare. It is 0.83 hectares. You know, the government defines 1 hectare land as a marginal farmland, which it considers is insufficient for any viable farming operations. A marginal farmer requires all kinds of support from outside and income support from outside, because 1 hectare of land, according to this NSSO data, at least minimum 2 hectares of land is required for a farming household to be able to get sufficient income and to be able to get employment possibilities in that piece of land. And you will be surprised to hear that there are, I first told you that the total availability of land is small, and how it is distributed. You know, according to, again, NSSO data, there are some 172 million households, 172 point some figures, million households in rural India. And out of these households, 8% households are landless households. 8% households do not have even house land. They are living in rented houses, etc. After that, 32% households have only homestead land, no farmland. That means in the total households in rural areas, 40% households do not possess any farmland. After that, it's very surprising that 30% households among the 60% who own farmland, 30% households have such small holdings that their average holding size is 0.2 hectare. 0.2 hectare, mind you. So that gives you the statistics about 70% of rural households, 40% do not have any land, and next 30% who have land have such small pieces, which is, less than half an acre, 1 biga, less than a biga, 0.2 hectares is the average land size. After that, you have some, I think, 17% or 13% households who have 17% households, I think, who have a holding size of 0.7 hectares. Then you have 9% households who have a holding size of 1.3%. These 9% households come into the category of small farmers. So 30% don't have any land, 17% have very small land, and then small farmers are 9%. When you add all of them, then there are only 6% households in rural India who have land holdings greater than 2 hectares. Only 6%. And these 6% households who belong to the category of medium households and large households own 40.6% of land. Whereas the rest of the 93% households have access to 59% of land, out of which 40% have no land. So with this distribution of land holdings and with this availability of land, how can you expect the farmers of India to have any viable farming operations and to be able to get dignified livelihood in the agrarian economy? I think when I came across these statistics, it was frightening for me. And I thought that within the existing system of land-labor relations, when you have individual holdings, if you have so many such small holdings and so many landless households, then unless you change the land-labor relations, there is no possibility of resolving the agrarian crisis. And we went to 8 states. We visited 4 districts in every state and 4 villages in every district. And when we went to the villages and far off villages and we saw the kind of poverty, I and my colleagues, I think one of them is here in the meeting, Vineet is here, we came to the conclusion that there is no question of talking about resolution of this agrarian crisis in this capitalist economy, where individual land holdings are supposed to give livelihood to. Now there are 40.7% of workforce is still in agriculture. At that time when we began the study, it was 47% of workforce in agriculture. So around half of your workforce is confined to a sector where the main resource base is just not available. And therefore, a resolution of agrarian crisis requires a very radical restructuring. And the 2 points that came to our mind, one is that the land which is available with such small holdings as with individual ownership has to be collectivized. It has to be collectivized to be able to get a viable farm size. So collective farming or cooperative farming is a must for agricultural operations to be viable. And second point that we realized was that 40% of workforce in agriculture, or at that time 47% of workforce in agriculture, there is no possibility to give dignified livelihood space for this workforce in agricultural sector. So it is necessary that their employment and livelihood space is expanded beyond the confines of agriculture. unless you are ready to think of expanding their employment space and their livelihood space beyond the confines of agriculture, it is not possible to take care of the agrarian crisis with which Indian economy is engulfed. So after we came to this conclusion, and he said that we were working in Joshi Adhikari Institute of Social Studies. We did the study from Joshi Adhikari Institute, and incidentally, that institute is affiliated to Communist Party of India. And Comrade A.B. Bardhan was the General Secretary at that time when we were doing this study. And when we went to him with our conclusions and the statistics and all, then he said, okay, our Kisan Sabha is ready to talk about cooperative farmings and collective farming, but give us some examples as to where collective farming and cooperative farming has succeeded. And when we looked around for examples of cooperatives, then we came to know Kudumbashree. That is how we reached Kudumbashree. And sorry for such a long introduction, but you would not have understood the whole idea of Kudumbashree unless I had given you this background. It was necessary. We were looking for into the cooperative structure. And what has happened in Indian economy is that after independence, when we talked of land reforms and we talked of redistribution of land, and government thought of giving support to the marginalized section of population and particularly agriculture, then this idea of cooperative was very popular. But the entire concept of cooperative was kept away from the production process. You know, the cooperatives were marketing cooperatives, the cooperatives were service cooperatives, the cooperatives were banking cooperatives, but production cooperatives were not encouraged by the government for whatever reasons, because cooperative production means socialized ownership, socialized possession of land, and we were not ready to introduce that idea. So we had a very, very elaborate structure of cooperatives in terms of banking, in terms of service cooperatives, in terms of marketing cooperatives. But we left our farmers alone to work on their very minuscule size holdings individually, and then decided to give them all sorts of support to make their farming viable. And after 75 years of independence, this is where we have reached, that we have 3 lakhs farmers committing suicide. And when you have a lockdown announced and with the 4 hours notice, then you have all these migrant workers walking thousands of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers back home to their villages. They have migrated from their villages because there is no employment possibility available in the village. So they go to urban areas, and the kind of employment that they get in urban areas is now very clear to everyone who has seen those migrant workers walking back home, because their roots are there in the villages. So this is the record of the development and growth of Indian economy post-independence. And I feel, and I think maybe many of you will agree with me that this is very disappointing. This is extremely disappointing, and there is a very urgent need to do a restructuring of production relations, or restructuring of property relations, and restructuring which is going to lead to some kind of equitable possibilities of participation in development process, equitable opportunities for employment, equitable opportunities for enjoying the resources of this country. Now, I'll again spend a little more time on women in agriculture. You know, the latest data says that now in agriculture, 40.7% of the workforce is in agriculture, and 191.2 million men and women are into agriculture. Out of this 191.2 men and women, 60 million are women and 131.2 million are men. So 131.2 million men are engaged in agriculture for their livelihoods, and 60 million women are engaged in agriculture for their livelihoods. Now, again, the NSSO divides the workers in a particular sector in three categories. One is self-employed, another is casual labor, and third is service or regular wage employee. So obviously in agriculture, service or regular wage employees are 2% of the total, and women are just 0.7% of the total. 40 million women are self-employed in agriculture, and about 20 million women are casual labor in agriculture. So these women who are into agriculture are either casual labor or self-employed. Now, when you're self-employed in agriculture, you have the title of being a cultivator. If you remember, in this protest, all the women who joined the farmers' protest, they came again and again there, and they said, "We are farmers. We do a lot of work. We are farmers, and you please give us recognition as farmers." So 40 million people, 40 million women who are self-employed in agriculture and who would like to get recognition as farmers, actually 75% of these 40 million women, in fact, in this protest only, Oxfam data came, Oxfam study said that only 13% women have land titles in their name. So women have this very special problem of the household land. They don't have any claim on the land title. So 40 million women who are self-employed in agriculture, 75% of them have no de facto or de jure control over the household land on which they work. So they work as unpaid family labor. And I gave you the statistics that majority of these farms are very small in size. So women work as unpaid family labor. There is no account of the time that they spend on farms. Of course, they get no separate income. They have no say in the decision making as to what should be done about the farm. I think all of you have noticed that in case of farmer suicides, when a farmer commits suicide, his wife has absolutely no knowledge as to what loan he took, from where he took the loan, what was the rate of interest, what was the general economics of the land, what land was leased, what land was in his name, what was the land title. The wife is not even aware of the details of the economics of the farming in which she's working. So 75% of the women are having no control, no knowledge about how the decisions are taken and what is the actual state of affairs. And then, of course, they have no control over the income that the farm operation fetches for the household. So out of these 40 million women who are self-employed in agriculture, I would say 75% of them are unpaid family labor in very small size holdings of family, because as I already explained that the holding size are very small. Now these women are working when they are asked to do some work, and when there is no work, they quietly withdraw. I will give you one more statistics which is frightening. But before that, I will talk about the 20 million women who are doing casual labor in agriculture. Now, in all the states, including Kerala, the wages that women get are lower than what men get. First of all, there are activities which are meant only for men, like plowing, digging well, or cane crushing, etc. So these activities you get higher wage. There are activities which are meant for women or women and men together, like replanting the paddy or harvesting or weeding. These activities, the wages are less, but for the same kind of activity, for same number of hours in every state of India, women's wage rate is lower than men's. So these casual, the 20 million women who are casual workers in the field of agriculture are disadvantaged workers because their wage rate is lower. Their wage rate is so low that when government introduced MGNREG, and MGNREG gives very low wages, then most of the men were not interested because the wages that they would get in the market is higher. And MGNREG has been the resort of the last this thing for women. And women have joined MGNREG in big numbers. There they have their own problems. Then there are some women who have, and this is what is very interesting for me, and I'll come to Kudumbashree after this. There are some women who do have de facto control of the land, household land. Who are these women? These women are farm widows. When the husbands have died, in many cases, women have taken de facto control, even if they don't have land titles, they've taken de facto control of their land. And they have come out to join the community of farmers, which is male-dominated community. Then there are other kind of women who have de facto control over land, which are the women of migrant workers. And migration is different than suicide. You know, when a farmer commits suicide, it is an individual act. One farmer commits suicide. But when there is migration in a village, it is a community act. In the village, the entire lot of young men migrate together. They have a labor contractor, or they go together as a group to some urban area or to some other region of the country to be able to get wages. So then when migration takes place, and migration takes place on a very large scale because employment in agriculture is scarce again. So when migration takes place, then women are left alone in the entire village. So especially in Bihar and Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, you will find villages where women have control as a group, because all the men have gone away. So here the women getting control of their land and farm operations has a very special significance. Because when they have control over land, not just one woman alone, but 10 women together, then those 10 women join, because they have control, de facto control over land. They don't have land titles. They cannot get credit from the bank. They cannot get government subsidy schemes. They cannot get labor, so they join together. So women, because of being put into a very disadvantageous position, they are forced to do collective work. And therefore, if you want to start a movement for collective farming, for collective labor, for groups working together, then the women, the protagonists who have come because of migration and farmer suicide, are the candidates who will take up this agenda on a very, very big scale and will be very positive about it, because they have no confidence in working alone, but once they work collectively, their confidence increases 1,000 times. So I will just recall, I have said that if you want to get a resolution for agrarian crisis, collective farming and cooperatives is necessary. And again, I have said that if you want to start a movement for collective farming and cooperatives, then it should begin with these women who have de facto control over land and who have a need to work collectively. So it'll be very easy to persuade them to work collectively. Now, this experiment of women working together we have observed in Kudumbashree, in Kerala. In Kerala, as has already been talked about, Kudumbashree it began in 1998 as a poverty alleviation program. And it began with women being persuaded to form, women from poor families. First, it began with women from poor families. They were persuaded to form neighborhood groups. And these neighborhood groups were then federated at block level into area development societies and further federated at panchayat level as community development societies. So these neighborhood groups were a network which was federated throughout the state. There are now about 4 million women who are members of this Kudumbashree neighborhood network group. And the neighborhood groups were then encouraged to start income earning activities, one thing. And they were also persuaded to participate in the responsibilities and activities of local self-government. So in that sense, they were also participating in the political process of panchayats, development schemes and planning. And one of the income earning activity which is taken on a very big scale in rural areas was farming. And these women who went into farming are generally from landless agricultural labor households or from households with very small holdings. You know, holdings of 50 cents, holdings of 50 cents is 100 cents is 1 acre, so it's half an acre. 30 cents, 20 cents, with such small household holdings. So these women come from the same group that I was talking about, very poor, marginal farmer households and landless laborers. Now, Kerala has the special development, which is not there in other states, that because of Gulf money and because of education, there are lots of households which have a piece of land, but are not interested in cultivating it. So these holdings are lying fallow. Then there are some households which belong to old couples, where the young children have gone away from agriculture, and the labor is very expensive, so they're not able to cultivate it. So the Kudumbashree neighborhood groups who took up farming as a group activity, and they formed joint liability group according to NABARD specification. They leased the fallow land from third parties sometimes, or they lease their own land in the group to get a viable farm size and cultivated that piece of land. Now, when we did our survey, we did the survey in 2012, 11 and 12. That time the collective farming scheme was in its initial stages. It has grown since then. But what we noticed was that in some, first of all, they were leasing land, so they were leasing it for a year or two, maximum 3 years. More than that, they would not have the land with them. So when you have possession of land for a short period, then the crops that you can grow are also specified, and the investment that you can make on that piece of land is also limited. So they had this problem of not being able to make investment. They had this problem of growing only selected crops like paddy, banana, vegetables, and tubers. And their production was not really excellent at that time. But the experience of working together had already transformed these women from what they were a year ago or 2 years ago. Because the confidence that they acquired in their collective strength and the pleasure that they got by not having individual responsibility, but group responsibility and group income and group benefits was something amazing. It was really amazing, the pleasure that they got and the confidence that they had, and they were their lives were transformed because their worldview expanded from their family to their group, from their group to the village, from village to the majority of marginalized and oppressed community. And they were always ready to help. He just said that during pandemic, the Kudumbashree women were offering food packets, and entire Kerala got food packets, and Kudumbashree women worked very hard in it. When there were floods in Kerala in 2018 and again now, the Kudumbashree women went out of their way to help out everybody. They gave people shelter in their homes. They gave them food. They did the cleaning job. They did the cooking job. So these women have become very, very dominant section of the political configuration of villages and panchayats. And I don't know in material terms whether this collective farming will, how it will proceed, because ultimately leased land possession is not a final form. If you have to have cooperatives and you want to have collective farms, then it has to be collective ownership. And how the government will translate this leased possession into ownership, whether they will have another round of land reform, is something on which I cannot say much. But I can definitely say that Kudumbashree women who have formed neighborhood groups, who have participated in local self-governments, social and political activities, and who have participated in income earning activities, in farming, in manufacturing, in other areas of providing food and restaurant, they have become very, potentially very revolutionary participants in the political process of local governments in Kerala, and hopefully it will translate at district level and at state level. And what we are talking about, women getting participation in the politics, in the political process, in development, Kerala's Kudumbashree experience gives sets a precedence as to how one can move forward. So I look at these women not as women who are jointly working and doing well in a capitalist society. I look at these women who are potential participants and protagonists for bringing about a radical change in land-labor relations and radical change in the entire production structure of the economy and in the values that we have and the vision that we have for future. Thank you. I finished.
That initially you talked about the agrarian crisis of the rapid depletion in the land under cultivation for the households, farmer households. So, what do you see as the solution to that basic crisis?
One would say that there should be immediately a moratorium on transfer of agricultural land for the sake of profit to non-agricultural usage. But the government, being the government, we don't expect the government to take this demand. And also the farmers would not like a freeze on the land market. Why? Because all these poor and small farmers, land is their only resource base. So whenever there is a contingency event and they require finance, they depend on land, and they would not like that their land can be, that they should not be allowed to sell it and get the finance required. So to stop the transfer of agricultural land into non-agricultural usage, the only solution is that land is pooled together as a cooperative. Once it is a cooperative, it cannot be snatched away, not by the government, not by the market. And so I feel that it is necessary that we change the relations. If we have individual holdings, then it is very difficult to stop the transfer of land to non-agricultural usage.
May I
Yes.
add one observation? Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for this wonderful presentation seminar. I just wanted to, clarify one thing. Like you said, the Kudumbashree model, it has brought more women into the social ambit, the political scenario. Now, this word politics, it's been misunderstood and it has been hated for obvious reasons, and mostly by women. And it is not necessarily that these women should contest in an election to do and bring about political change, and if we can call it even the political revolution, because I have seen women who are in the social the political arena, but they do not want to call themselves a political party. They do not want to call themselves a political organizations. They want to specifically call themselves an apolitical organization. And I believe this Kudumbashree has brought more women into politics, although they do not know that they are participating in politics per se. And that's really a wonderful platform that Kudumbashree has provided. And the Humanist Party is looking forward to learning of more, the hands-on experience from you. And we are looking forward to more interactions like this. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is a subject on which I think people will have very few, and one has to discuss it. But my opinion is that if you want any major change in the system, then you have to think in terms of state power. You cannot think of a state which is not people-friendly state and then expect that state to do things which people want. So politics is an essential part of any kind of radical change in the society. If you just want to do social work at a very localized level and help people or bring greenery in a village and things like that, fine. But if you really want, you just see the magnitude of the workforce which is involved, the magnitude of people who want livelihood and who want land. And this cannot be delivered without the state power with you. So this idea that politics is not our arena, and if we are honest and if we are sincere about what we want to do for the society, we should keep away from politics. I don't agree with this. I think
Absolutely.
I may agree that political parties you may be dissatisfied with, and you may not find any single political party with which you feel that this is genuine and we are with the party. This kind of dissatisfaction may be there, but that doesn't mean that you give up this idea of dealing with state and acquiring state power. That is necessary. So you have to have a political party. If it is not present, you build one. But you have to have a people-friendly political party which will provide you with a people-friendly state, and then only you can have the kind of transformation that are required for the sake of humanity. This humanist group, I'm sure everybody wants that people should not starve, people should not walk on the roads hundreds of kilometers as migrant laborers did. People should be allowed to send their children to school. If you want all that, you require very, very big change, and you cannot have it without state power. And then again, about Kerala, this Kudumbashree idea, the Kudumbashree mission, poverty alleviation mission, it generated with the experiment with people's plan that Kerala government had. With panchayat elections, the state of Kerala really gave, I think, 1/3 of the budget to panchayats. And panchayats were made very powerful. And then in the panchayat, they wanted to have gram sabhas. They wanted every participant to engage himself and herself into what is required locally for development and planning, and then incorporate it into district level plan, panchayat level plan, district level plan, and state level plan. That people's plan experiment did not proceed, and there was this Congress government and left-hand government coming to power one after another. But that idea of, in Kerala, I think the idea that people have a right to participate in the development process and give their opinion in the development process, it exists with UDF as well as with LDF. And so the Kudumbashree women have actually, when Kudumbashree was formed, and it was formed along with local self-government, and the panchayat people sort of dominated on Kudumbashree women, and panchayat had the right to nominate the office holders, office bearers in Kudumbashree. Kudumbashree was unhappy. So in 2008, they had a reform, and they started doing elections within Kudumbashree for their office bearers. And that gave them tremendous confidence. And they said, we are same as local self-government.
Wonderful.
We are not under them. And now when there is reservation for women in panchayat elections, Kudumbashree women are faring very well in that reservation, in that election process. They are saying that we know, since we have come from the ground, we know what development people want, what women want, what poor people want. So if we are in panchayat, we will be able to deliver what is wanted. So they are ready to go into politics. And also, I'm telling you, because I want to be frank, that Kudumbashree is a left party's, especially CPM's this thing. So CPM as a party has tried to dominate the participation and the opinions that Kudumbashree women take in local politics. And very happily, the women have not always agreed to party dictates. So they are political in the real sense of being independent and knowing what is right. That is my observation, but I don't know.
Beautiful. I'll just close with this, added observation. I think we should have a collective of these parties also.
Dr. Mehta, two more questions. One question is, when women form these agricultural cooperatives, does it provide them work throughout the year?
These, especially in Kudumbashree, the women are JLG members along with one more occupation. So they work on their farms, the JLG farms, that is the collective farms, most of the time only part-time. They have an additional occupation with them. And the farms, although they are collective farms, they are still small in size. Many of them are, very few of them are more than 3 acres or 4 acres of land. So obviously there is not, but there is more work than normally a farmer in Punjab and Haryana would have, because they are not able to use machines. So all the work is plowing, preparing the land, everything is done by themselves as labor. So they do spend a lot of time, but not throughout, of course not. And it doesn't provide them income for sufficient income to fulfill their family needs. They have alternative occupations, the women also, apart from other family members. So as I said, that the economics of it is not so important as the politics.
No.
Thank you. I think Mr. Sheikh has a question.
Yes. Yeah, two small questions.
Yes,
one is that how did the Kudumbashree program impact the group when they were individuals, and after being into the structure of Kudumbashree, how did it impact them materially? Is there any sort of quantification? Would it be 10%, 15%, 20%? Did it matter in terms of livelihoods and income generation? This is one question. Second question is, today, what they are, the form which is being propagated generally all over India is that of farmer companies. So how would Kudumbashree be significantly better than the company format? apart from the social, apart from the social, of course, there are so many social benefits are there.
The first question is in our survey, we found most women saying that their income level has increased, but as you're rightly saying, not significantly, maybe 10% or 15%. And the additional income that they got, they acquired some household good, or they sent their children to a better school. But I'm also talking about very initial stages of collective farming. In last 5, 6, 7 years, progress have been made. And farming is one activity in which is really taken up by very poor households, women from very poor households. But there are other income earning activities of Kudumbashree, like they are also into IT, information technology. They are also into restaurants. They're also into producing very special milk powders. And these activities, the women are coming from urban areas, and they are better off women. They are not. The Kudumbashree program is no longer just limited to poverty group population. So there are income earning activities where women are performing well, and their material advantage also may be significant. I don't have exact statistics with them, but in farming, no. In farming, the material advantage, as I can see, is not very large, and the small farm size and the fact that they have only leased land further constrains the material gains that they get. Although I must also mention this point that the JLG farms of Kudumbashree do get state support in different manner. Like they get subsidized credit, they get subsidized seeds, they get subsidized fertilizers, they get training, they get help to do organic farming and things like that. A lot of state support is there. Your second question about farmers' company and the cooperative movement that I'm talking about, not Kudumbashree per se, is one is talking about small groups being federated at different levels and becoming a major this thing. But a small group or a more efficient group or a federation of group, if it starts competing in a capitalist world like a company, then the whole purpose of cooperation is lost. So when in Venezuela, Chavez introduced cooperative structure in a big way, the cooperatives were evaluated not just on the basis of profits that they earned, but lots of other criteria about what they, social accounting, if you want to call them. So they had a list of criteria with which they evaluated the cooperative. So idea is that if you are part of cooperative movement, you are not thinking in terms of doing well in the capitalist world. If you join together to do well in the capitalist world, then you're not changing the world. I want to have a cooperative movement which will change the world, take you away from profit motives.
No, very true that there have been very substantial gains in terms of social and other, cultural and community terms. But typically, these would be today, given the reality, these would be enclaves which offer you an alternative modus vivendi from what is there, an alternative to competition. So cooperation has to be seen as a viable and desirable alternative to competition. Now, can that succeed? You have in the digital world, we have had a lot of successes wherein, say, for instance, you have your open source movements, or even a thing like, where people contribute without, they reject principles of competition and go by cooperation, and they have succeeded. Wikipedia itself, we know Wikipedia has a lot of problems and issues with it, but in some ways, it goes to show that, well, people can cooperate. So is there a success? Is the idea that there is no alternative to competition is sort of contested. So what should you be creating small enclaves which contest, which are better? which are demonstrably better and which contest the idea of competition being the only way ahead. This is, can you position things like Kudumbashree or cooperation that way? This is the question.
About Kudumbashree, I am no authority. I think people who are handling Kudumbashree should say what their vision is about the entire program. My vision is to break this capitalist society and to have a socialist society. And I think that Kudumbashree has set a precedence and one can learn from it. And what happens to Kudumbashree is not my problem. My problem is that this whole movement of cooperation and the underprivileged section of the society become the main protagonist and have and give us a different idea of our world.
Right.
Yeah. One last question, Dr. Mehta. Has any other state thought of introducing something like Kudumbashree?
In Andhra, they had this Deccan Development Society, which initially began this experiment of women's groups having common leased land and working on it. And then they had also, they changed the entire agriculture cultivation practices. They collected seeds, the local seeds and local varieties and organic farming and all that. But Deccan Development Society was an NGO. It was not a state.
Oh.
Kudumbashree has state support. So that experiment petered out. Then Bihar government took this up, the women's self-help groups getting into economic activities and doing things. But I don't know how well it is functioning in Bihar. I don't know about other states who have taken up women's groups and their income earning activities. But Bihar is nowhere like Kerala.
But here I would like to add that in Nabad, they did take, Kudumbashree was taken as a sort of an example of organizing people, and then they came up, and then they later changed it over to farmer producer organizations. But essentially, the inspiration which they drew was from the Kudumbashree, from the some of the cooperative.
The Kudumbashree joint liability groups were according to Nabad specification. Nabad gives the specification that you have small groups, just 5 to 10 people, and yeah.
I think there's a question from Mr. Rajesh also.
No, I wanted to ask her about the difference between what she's talking about, the cooperative movement and the FPO. FPO.
That the whole idea of cooperative in a capitalist economy, cooperative is quite popular in a capitalist economy. And the idea is that those who are underprivileged, who are marginalized, who cannot compete individually in this capitalist economy can group together and become powerful enough to be able to do successful business. So this is a very popularly accepted idea, and in fact, unfortunately, look at Amul. Amul began with very small milk producers cooperative, but Amul has now become one of the biggest company in the capitalist world and has fetched so much name. So if you still think in terms of cooperation, you think in terms of gaining strength through cooperation and doing well in this system, then it is something different than cooperation as a means to change your values about what is to be produced, what is to be marketed, how to be produced, and how it should be distributed. So it may not be very fashionable to talk about a socialist society, but I want to insist that a civilized society can only be a socialist society.
So I think we had a very interesting and very enlightening talk as well as discussion. I will request Mayaji to conclude with a vote of thanks.
First of all, let me thank Jayaji for her insightful talk on the subject. it's very hard to conclude here because there are so many things we still want to talk about, but I don't want to bring up something because this could go on forever. And this topic of cooperation, cooperatives is very close to our heart. I mean, it's very close to any humanist. So I think this is something we should discuss further later on, not in this kind of forum, but where we can discuss on a one-to-one level. So I thank you once again for this excellent session that we've had, and I thank all the other participants who have come to listen to Jaya Mehta ji for her insightful talk, and for making this session all the more interesting with your questions and discussions. So thank you everyone for the session, and we look forward to seeing you all again more such sessions in future.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for
May I-
giving me the opportunity.
Thank you.
We will
May I-
connect again. We definitely
Yeah,
need to
may I
connect.
request everyone to please leave their